Good morning. Chapter 8 covers Macintosh and Linux processes and boot systems. There we go. And here are the objectives for this chapter. Okay, the Mac OS X version 10.04, also called the Darwin Core, is based on BSD Unix application layer. Okay. The hierarchical file system, files stored are nested in directories or folders. Most of us are familiar with that concept. And extended file format file system, HFS+, which was introduced with the Mac OS 8.1, supports smaller file sizes on larger volumes, resulting in more efficient use of the disk space. The File Manager utility handles reading, writing, and storing data to physical media. The Finder tool works with the operating system to keep track of files and maintain the user's desktop. In older Mac OS operating systems, the file consisted of two parts, a data fork and a resource fork, stored metadata and application information. Macintosh OS 9 volumes. A volume is any storage medium used to store files. A volume can be all or just part of a hard disk. However, on a floppy disk, it's the entire disk, always. A little detail here, allocation and logical blocks. Logical blocks cannot exceed 512 bytes. Allocation blocks are a set of consecutive logical blocks. There are two types of end-of-file descriptors: logical end-of-file and physical end-of-file. A logical end-of-file is the actual size of the file, and the physical end of file is the number of allocation blocks for that file. A clump is a group of contiguous allocation blocks. Clumps are used to reduce fragmentation. The use of open firmware as opposed to BIOS firmware, commonly on PC-based systems. With using open firmware, the processor and system-wide firmware controls the microprocessor after hardware installation. The boot process for OS 9 works this way. You power on the computer. The hardware self-test runs. Open firmware runs. Microsoft operating system starts. The startup disk is located. System files are opened. System extensions are loaded. And OS 9 Finder starts. And the next couple slides show an overview of the HFS and HFS Plus system file handle data. Some more terminology. Okay. Older Mac OS operating systems use the first two logical blocks. They're called boot blocks. The master directory block, DB, or volume information block, VIB, stores all information about a volume. A volume control block, VCB, stores information from the MDB when the operating system mounts. Extents overflow file stores any file information that's not in the MDB or a VCB. The catalog is a listing of all files and directories on the volume. It maintains relationships between files and directories. A volume bitmap tracks used and unused blocks on the volume. And Mac OS 9 uses the B tree file system for file manager. Actual file data is stored on the leaf nodes. B tree also uses header, index, and map nodes. For Macintosh forensic software, we're going to talk about tools and vendors, including Black Tag Technologies, Sub Rosa Soft, Mac Forensics Lab, Guidance Encase, X-Ways Forensics, ProDiscover Forensic Edition, and SleuthKit and Autopsy. To examine a Macintosh computer, you need to make an image of the drive. A static acquisition of the suspect drive is preferable to a live acquisition. Removing the drive from the Macintosh Mini CPU is difficult, and attempting to do so without Apple factory training could damage the computer. You need a Macintosh-compatible forensics boot CD to make an image. Black Tag Technology sells acquisition products specifically designed for OS 9 and earlier, as well as OS X. For example, Macquisition is a forensics boot CD that makes an image of a Macintosh drive. After making an acquisition, the next step is to examine the image of the file system. The tool you use depends on the format of the image drive. Black Tag Technologies, Macintosh Forensic Software, and Sub Rosa Soft Mac Forensics Lab have a feature for disabling and enabling disk arbitration. Being able to turn off the mount function in OS X allows you to connect a suspect drive to a Macintosh without a write blocking device. In examining OS 9 data structures with Black Bag, activities in this section assume that you have a Macintosh running OS X. All data acquisition image files must be configured as disk images with correct file names and extensions. To keep the correct order of each segment, numbers need to be inserted between the file name and the extension. Load images as a virtual disk image, double-clicking the files in the folder. OS X loads and displays an icon of the virtual mounted disk with the name Untitled on the desktop. Then you can rename it with your case name. Examining OS 9 data structures with Black Bag continued. Start Black Bag from Finder. Black Bag includes several utilities for conducting a full analysis of evidence, including PC disk info, PMAP info, directory scan, file search, Mac Carver, and File Spy. Activity 1, use the black bag directory scan utility, which lists all folders and files visible and hidden in the image loaded as a DMG file. Activity 2, use file searcher utility to locate files by specific extension. Unix and Linux disk structures and boot processes. Unix flavors include System 5 variants, Sun, Solaris, IBM AIX, HP UX, BSD, FreeBSD, OpenBSD, and NetBSD. Linux distributions include Red Hat, Fedora, Ubuntu, Debian. Most are consistent with Unix operating systems because they were written with Unix in mind. The Linux kernel is regulated under the GNU General Public License Agreement. BSD license is similar to the GPL, but makes no requirement for derivative works. Some useful Linux commands to find information: uname-a, ls-l, ls-ul, and the file name, and netstat-s. Sorry, I had my mute button on because I was coughing. Linux file systems include EX2FS and then the journaling version of EX2FS called EX3FS. Employs inodes, contains information about each file or directory with pointers to other inodes or blocks to keep the internal link count, and deleted inodes have a count value of 0. A main point about Unix and Linux: everything is a file. Files are objects with properties and methods. Unix consists of 4 components. The boot block. Block is a disk allocation unit of at least 512 bytes. It contains the bootstrap code. Unix Linux computer has only one boot block located on the main hard disk. A superblock indicates disk geometry, available space, allocation, and first inode, and it manages the file system. Inode blocks: first data after the superblock assigned to every file allocation unit. And then data blocks is where the directories and files are actually stored. This is location is linked to directly to the inodes. A bad block inode keeps track of disk and bad sectors. And here it's talking about some command line commands. Now, bad sectors can be used on a Unix and Linux system to hide information. And this figure is just illustrating inode pointers in Linux file systems. And here are some Unix and Linux shell commands and what they do. Alright, the Unix and Linux boot process. The instruction code in firmware is loaded into RAM. The instruction code then checks the hardware and loads the boot program. The boot program loads the kernel and transfers control to the kernel. The kernel's first task is to identify all devices. The additional things that the kernel does: it boots the system in single user mode, then runs startup scripts and enables multi-user mode, identifies the root directory, swap and dump files, sets host name, time zone, runs consistency checks on the file system and mounts partitions, starts network daemons, sets up the network card, establishes user, system, and accounting and quotas. The Linux loader, Lilo, the old boot manager, can start 2 or more operating systems, uses configuration file lilo.conf. The Grand Unified Bootloader, or GRUB, is more powerful than the old Lilo. It resides on the master boot record and command line or menu driven. Unix and Linux drives and partition schemes. Most commercial computer forensic tools analyze Unix. Sorry, I've got a call coming in. Unix and Linux drives and partition schemes labeled as paths starting at the root directory represented by /. Primary master disk is /dev/had. First partition is had1. Second partition is HDA1. HDA2 is the second partition. Primary slave or secondary master or slave is HDB, and the first partition is HDB2. SCSI controllers /dev/SDA with the first partition SDA1. And Linux treats SATA, USB, and FireWire devices the same way it treats SCSI devices. Most commercial computer forensics tools can analyze Unix UFS and UFS2 and Linux EXT2, 3, Reaser F file system, Reaser 4 file systems. Freeware tools such as SleuthKit and web browser interface, Autopsy browser. Foremost, a freeware carving tool that can read many image file formats, and the configuration file foremost.conf. Tarball is a data file containing one or more files or whole directories and their content. Installing SleuthKit and Autopsy requires downloading and installing the most recent updates of these tools, and it shows where to get SleuthKit here. You need to have root privileges. And just different screenshots of doing this. Other disk structures, including SCSI, IDE, EIDE, and SATA drives. CD data structures. Alright, on a CD or other optical disc, the laser burns flat areas called lands. The lower areas are called pits. The transitions from lands to pits have a binary value of 1 or on. No transition has a binary value of 0 or off. And the International Organization of Standards, ISO, define these standards here, 9660 for CD, CDR, CDRW, and ISO 13346 for DVDs. Here are the different layers that constitute all kinds of CDs, including CDR and CDRW. And here's a surface area organization of a CD. Data is configured into 3 regions: the lead in area, the program area, and the lead out area. A frame is the unit storage, contains 24 17-bit symbols. Frames are combined into blocks. Blocks are combined into sectors. Okay, and the slower technology is constant linear velocity. Constant angular velocity is a little faster. The DVD disk structure uses Universal Disk Format, or UDF. In this case, it's called micro UDF. For backwards compatibility, some DVDs have integrated ISO 9660 to allow compatibility with current operating systems. SCSI disks, and this deals with both internal and external, provide a common bus communication interface. During investigation, check if the device is internal or external. Check if card, cables, adapters, terminators, and drivers are available. Advanced SCSI Programming Interface, or ASPI, provides several software drivers for communication between the operating system and the SCSI component. Newer SCSI drives typically use an integrated self-terminator, But one problem with older SCSI drives is identifying which jumper group terminates and assigns a port number. IDE, EIDE, and SATA devices. Current technologies to connect IDE, EIDE devices to PC systems and the problems that they can cause during investigation. CMOS on current PCs identifies proper disk settings, and this creates problems if an investigator tries to connect an old IDE device to a new forensic workstation. Some of the possible solutions to that problem include disk imaging tools, getting out an old PC, or using cards and adapters. IDE host protected area, AT-API 5, AT introduced in 1998, reserved and protected areas of IDE devices, protected area runtime interface extension service, or parties, data stored by diagnostic and stored programs. Tools that can handle that are like X-Way's replica. HPA is also referred to as BIOS Engineering Extension Recorder, or BEER, data structure. One trick suspects use to conceal evidence is hiding disk partitions. Norton Disk Edit can be used to change the disk partition table so there's no indication that the deactivated partition exists. You should use imaging tools that can access unpartitioned areas of the drive. And I apologize for the sort of in the middle interruption. Hopefully everything is back together again.